Welcome to this module, legislation. So what are the objectives of this module? Well, with the introduction of the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order 2005, known as the RRFSO in October 2006, fire and rescue authorities and other bodies known as enforcing authorities have a duty to enforce fire safety in non-domestic premises. Now, most of the requirements of the RRFSO will not be new, as many are similar to the Fire Precautions Workplace Regulations 1997, but they are applicable to a far larger range of premises. For example, all non-domestic premises, including common parts of houses in multiple occupation known as HMOs, and those premises used by the self-employed, including family-run businesses and the voluntary sector. Now, provision is made for the protection of a wide range of persons under the RRFSO than the 1997 regulations. Now, experience has shown that enforcement activity and uniformity of approach varies across different authorities. Different fire officers are approaching the legislation differently, and that guidance on the intent of the RRFSO may help increase consistency. That's the aim of the module, really, to give you the guidance and explain what the intent is so that we get all the fire authorities enforcing it the same way. And that's what this is about. So what are the aims and outcomes of this presentation? Well, at the end of this presentation, you should be able to state the primary fire safety legislation applicable in the UK, where it applies and the structure of the legislative document, and understand the ethos behind the document. You should be able to explain the meaning of the terms responsible person, relevant person and general fire precautions. You should know the duties of the responsible person in complying with the current legislation. And finally, state the fire authorities and inspectors' powers under the current legislation. They are the aims and outcomes of this presentation. The RRFSO. Now, the legislation covering fire safety in England and Wales at the moment is the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order 2005, which again came into force on the 1st of October 2006. Now, the two main pieces of legislation that the RRFSO repealed and replaced are, you've got the Fire Precautions Act 1971 and the Fire Precautions Workplace Regulations 1997 as amended. Now, the Fire Precautions Act 1971 could only be enforced anyway in hotels, boarding houses and places of work that needed a fire certificate. And the Fire Precautions Workplace Regulations applied to places where persons were employed. And therefore, there were loopholes in these regulations too. That's why the RRFSO was brought in. Take away these loopholes. So how is the RRFSO applied? Well, it applies to any premises. That's the key. It's just about any premises. Now, there are a few exceptions, which I'll cover later, but generally apply all. Now, the regime introduced is based on a risk assessment. So everything's based on risk, and it relies heavily on self-compliance. Not to say there's a fire officer, give me a fire certificate, I'm covered. Self-compliance. The responsible person's responsible. Now, the fire service used to, like I say, issue fire certificates, and people thought they were safe. They used to get a fire certificate, I'm covered, put it in a safe, lock it away. They never complied with it. They never made sure they tested things and maintained the means of escape, etc. That was a legal document. They thought they were covered by having a fire certificate. It was like having just a piece of paper. No, not adequate, and that's why the RFSO brings out. Now, employers are under a personal duty to comply with these regulations, and the responsibility for compliance rests with the responsible person, whoever that may be. And again, I'm going to go into more detail who the responsible person is shortly. Now, everything initially hinges on management recognising their responsibilities and carrying out a suitable and sufficient fire risk assessment and taking appropriate measures to reduce or remove the risk, without waiting to be told so by the fire brigade. Don't wait till we turn up there and see it to unblock that exit and remove that thing. You do it now. Don't wait for the fire brigade to turn up. You must do it now. In almost all premises, the enforcing authority for the RRFSO is your local fire authority. There are exceptions again, and I'll cover it, but there are other parties, but generally it is the authority, the local fire authority that enforce the RRFSO. So, who else enforces the RRFSO then? Well, firstly, you've got the Health and Safety Executive. The HSE enforce the regulations in premises such as chemical processing plants, oil refineries, nuclear installations and power plants. And they also cover construction sites, a ship under construction, reconstruction or conversion or repair by persons other than the master and the crew of the ship. So if the crew repair it, you could argue that it's not covered. But anybody else, the HSE enforce the RRFSO on those. Who else does it? Well, the local authorities. At sports grounds designated under the provisions of Section 1 of the Safety and Sports Ground Act 1975, and there's also covers regulated stands within the meaning of Section 26 of the Fire Safety and Sports Act 1987. The enforcing authority will be the local authority, and they are responsible for the issue of a safety certificate under those acts. Now, when a sports ground contains a regulated stand, the local authority is the enforcing authority for the stand, and the fire and rescue authority is the enforcing authority for the rest of the sports ground. So do you understand? A bit of an overlap there. The local authority is responsible for the stand, but the fire and rescue authority is the enforcing authority for the rest of the sports ground. That's where it contains a regulated stand. Now, in many cases, the local authority is the same as the fire and rescue authority, so generally there's only one enforcing authority. However, where they're not, it's good practice to consider having one authority anyway responsible for the whole ground, so they need to liaise with each other. Now, again, this is a pragmatic solution in line with the Taylor report into the Hillsborough disaster, which recommended that there should only be one authority. So again, you need to clarify this. Now, where a local authority receives an application for a safety certificate under either sports ground legislation mentioned, they are legally obliged to consult the fire authority anyway. They'd normally ask for the fire brigade's input, to be quite honest with you, for anyone. So either way, the fire authority are involved directly in the issue of that safety certificate. You've also got Her Majesty's Inspectorate. Now, these cover Crown-owned and Crown-occupied premises. So the HMI cover Crown-owned and or Crown-occupied premises. If it's owned by the Crown, it's Her Majesty's Inspectorate that covers it. You've also got the Defence Fire Service. Now, the Defence Fire Service, they enforce the regulations for the armed services covering armed bases. So Navy, Army, Air Force, those bases will normally have a Defence Fire Service that will enforce the RRFSO, but if there's an incident, obviously they still call the Falkland Fire Brigade, and when they arrive they take charge of the incident, but of the actual enforcement of the RRFSO it's the Defence Fire Service. Now you've also got the Crown Premises Inspection Group. Now, for the avoidance of doubt, all civilian prisons, young offenders institutes, immigration detention, holding or removal centres, you've got court custody sites, custom and excise detention areas, these are all the responsibility of the fire inspectors of the Crown Premises Inspection Group, regardless of whether they are operated by the relevant government department or it's contracted out. Doesn't matter. They are the enforcing body in these areas. Now, local authority police stations are the responsibility of the Fire and Rescue Authority for the area where they're covered. So they cover police stations and they have to carry out fire rescue assessments just like everybody else. Yeah, there's been some serious cases in police stations. There's one, a member of the public walked in, obviously with a grievance. He walked into a police station with a can of petrol. He poured it all over the petrol station. He had a mask on, put it all on, set fire to it. And it spread and it burnt down the whole police station. Was this foreseeable? No one picked up on the fire risk assessment that someone's going to come in and pour petrol on the main entrance and set fire to the whole police station. Was this foreseeable? Well, people say to me, no, well, not really. Well, it was, because it turned out this is the second time it's been done. It's been done before. Now, the first time it's done, you could argue it might not be foreseeable. But after that, I would say it is foreseeable. Now, what can you do to prevent someone coming in and putting petrol? Well, don't upset the public for a start off. Well, that's not easy. How could you do? What could you do? Well, it's hard to control it. You have CCTV. The key thing I would have argued is make sure that the main entrance has got good fire stopping from the rest of the police station. In other words, do what you can to prevent it, but if it does happen, at least don't make it burn down the whole police station. So they should have had excellent fire stopping to stop it happening, to stop it spreading and burning down the whole police station. What is the structure of the RRFSO then? Let's have a look at the structure of the RRFSO. Well, the RRFSO comprises of 5 parts. There's 52 articles and 5 schedules. So that's what it comprises of. There's 5 parts, 52 articles and 5 schedules. The arrangement of the articles are, Part 1 covers general, that's 1 to 7. Part 2 is fire safety duties, covers 8 to 24. Part 3 is enforcement, that's 25 to 31. Part 4 is offences and appeals, the articles, 32 to 36. And Part 5 is miscellaneous, that covers 37 to 52. So that's the structure. The arrangements of the schedules then. Schedule 1, Part 1 covers the matters to be considered in risk assessment in respects of dangerous substances. So this is like an added bit. Anything dangerous covers under Part 1 of Schedule 1. Part 2 covers matters to be taken into account in risk assessment of young persons. So that's specific for young persons. Part 3 covers the principles of prevention. Big important aspect to the regulations. You've got to prevent fires. You don't just say, we'll deal with any aftermath. You prevent fires. That's the ethos of the RRFSO. And finally, you've got Part 4, which is measures to be taken in respect of the dangerous substances. So these are the measures to be taken rather than matters to be considered. Now, that's the basic structure of the RRFSO. Let's go through it then. Part 1, general. Article 1 cites the name of the order and gives the dates of its commencement. Then you've got a list of all the interpretations and definitions. So if you're not sure what something means, look at the definitions and look at the interpretations. It's trying to give you some guidance there in Article 2. Article 3 defines the meaning of the term responsible person. I'm going to cover this in more detail because it's quite a complex bit, this getting the identification of the responsible person. Article 4 defines the meaning of the term general fire precautions. And this includes, you've got to consider, reducing the risk of fire and spread of fire. You've got ensuring the means of escape from the premises are maintained. You've got ensuring the means of escape can be used at all material times. You've got to be able to get out. I've been to buildings where fire doors are not easy to open. I had one, the door wouldn't open. I said to the guy, I can't open this fire exit. How do you open it? He says, come here, it's a bit stiff. What you have to do is give it a jiggle and turn it left. He gave it a jiggle, turned it left, it opened. I said, do us a favour, could you put a sign on the door saying, give it a jiggle and turn it left? What does that mean? It means it's not available at all material times. You're compromising the RRFSO. It means it's bust. Get it fixed, give it a jiggle. The next one is means for fighting fire and adequate fire extinguishers. You've got to provide training, you've got to provide the extinguishers. You've also got means for detecting fire and giving warnings are adequate. You've got to have smoke detectors where necessary. And the key thing, where do you need smoke detection in buildings? Where do you need smoke detection in buildings? Well, a key rule is you need smoke detection anywhere. A fire could spread undetected and potentially trap the occupants. So when you're doing your fire risk assessment in any building, look and think, could a fire spread in there undetected and potentially trap the occupants? If it can, you need detection. Obviously, then it goes through sleeping risk where you've got to provide it, but that's a bit of a golden rule there. You've also got the action to be taken in case of fire. You've got the instruction and training of employees to make sure it's satisfactory. In other words, carried out by a competent person. You've also got to make sure you've got sufficient measures taken to mitigate the effects of a fire should it happen. So now you're assuming we've got one. What can we do to mitigate the effects of it? That covers Article 4. That's Article 4 covered. Article 5. Now this explains the duties applicable to persons under the order, be they be classified as responsible persons or having other obligations with respect to the tenancy of the premises regarding maintenance and safety within the premises. So this is people other than the responsible persons, Article 5. Article 6, this covers the application to premises. In other words, where does it apply? And like I said before, it covers just about any building. You've got offices, shops, factories, warehouses, sleeping accommodation, residential care, educational, places of assembly, theatres, cinemas, outdoor events, hospitals. Basically, you've got just about all premises. Now, particular attention is drawn to the definition of domestic premises. It is the sole exception to the rule that the order does not apply to domestic premises used for domestic purposes. And it also disapplies the order in relation to certain means of transport. But in practice, only vehicles not used on the public highway are likely to fall within the scope of the order. For example, forklift trucks or cherry pickers used in a warehouse. And it also does not apply to fields, woods or land without a building, an aircraft, locomotive, trailer being used as a means of transport, a mine, but not buildings on the surface. So, on a mine, the buildings on the surface are covered by the RFSO. The mine itself is not. And a borehole. That is where it's not applicable. Article 7 states where the order does not apply with respect to young people engaged in a family undertaking. And also to certain means of transport, again, certain occupancies, where compliance with the order would prevent them from carrying out their duties. For example, the armed forces, police or other emergency services. So certain times it clarifies that it's not, don't have to apply it because it would actually stop them doing their duties. Yeah? Certain circumstances. That's Article 7.